what types of things are going to be covered, what things are not going to be covered. Obviously, there's people that have automobile damage. We have some people who have home damage who actually had flood insurance, and then those who have home damage, flood insurance. On the next slide, we talk about automobile damage. If you have automobile damage, please contact your auto insurance carrier right away. If you have comprehensive coverage, it actually covers flooding your vehicle, whether it's swept away, whether it just got water in, water out, but that should be covered as long as you have comprehensive coverage. And again, the payout's going to depend on, your own personal choices in terms of, did you pay to upgrade to the newer year model, or, how your policy pays out is going to be individual. But just one thing to remember, they're always going to take their deductible out of that payment. So I know in our situation, we had to put extra money with it to go buy a new car, but at least we did not have the debt and no car. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of gap coverage when you buy an automobile. Most auto companies or dealerships offer it to you. Basically, not many people don't take it, but certain situations, like if you have a work car that you had to have for work, was our situation. We had to have a car for work, but the company paid us for the payments every month, but we had to have it in our name. So if there was ever a loss, we had to make for the full amount that we paid for it. So we actually had gap insurance on that. Another situation would be for somebody who has a conversion van, or maybe they've had a vehicle that has been converted for wheelchair use, something of that nature. You have your base VIN number, which is what insurance typically wants to cover at, and then you have a gap policy that covers the difference between what the VIN number amount is and those amounts of conversions. So gap insurance will also kick in. I know I told you guys that we experienced this loss too, and when we experienced our flood, we were at probably one of the lowest points in our life. My husband had been laid off for 2 years at that time, and I was making just enough money to put food on the table and try to paid, but I was actually 3 days late in paying the car insurance because I just didn't have it. I was waiting on my next paycheck when our flood came. So of course the vehicles that washed away money on, but luckily we did have the gap insurance on that. And again, the gap coverage is only going to be in effect if you've actually made your car payment that month. So if somebody's had a vehicle swept away, please tell them don't stop making those payments, even though I know it's hard because you don't have the money. But if those payments are current, that gap coverage will kick in, and that gap coverage will pay off that automobile. Again, you're not left with money in your hand, but you're also not left with debt on your credit report. Any questions on auto or gap coverage as it relates to flooding? Okay. All right, so let's move on to the actual flood damage. So I would venture to say the majority of the people that have been affected do not have flood insurance coverage. However, if they do, they need to start by contacting their insurance company ASAP. Obviously, you're not going to have your insurance documents. You probably don't have your loan number with you, because if you're like anybody else, that was filed in your house, which is now, they're partially underwater or totally underwater. You can call them, give them your social security number. They can look up your policy. What I will tell you is just be prepared to wait and be patient. I know it's going to be really hard. They're trying to assign adjusters, but obviously nobody can actually get in until the waters recede. But in the meantime, you're going to need to start working on your proof of loss document. So anything in your home, and this is going to apply whether you have flood insurance or whether you do not, and you're applying with FEMA for non-insured persons, your proof of loss, and again, your mind is reeling at this point in time, or your clients' minds are reeling at this point in time, and most people don't even know what day it is anymore because you've kind of lost track. But you have to, unfortunately, force yourself to sit down and create a spreadsheet of everything. And so a little bit further down in the slide deck, I've actually attached one that we used personally. basically the best rule of thumb is to just start in one room, sit down, visualize, okay, what was everything that I had in that room. You need to describe the item. You need to talk about, if you can remember, where you purchased the item, how much you paid for the item. The more detailed you are, the better, because what they're going to do is they're going to take all of this information and make an aggregate discount, almost to like what I would qualify as garage sale discounts to it. They're going to apply these discounts to it. So the more detailed you can be about the items in that room, and that goes down to the clothes in your closet, the jewelry, you know, number of pairs of shoes, hats, boots, whatever, anything and everything you can list, because you're trying after they apply their deductions to it to be at your maximum amount. So on the next page, we'll talk about how to file your flood insurance claim. Again, there's a link here to a little infographic for you. You need to call your insurance company, walk through it with them, and then start making your notes. On properties that actually have flood insurance, the maximum flood insurance for a residential home is $250,000, no matter the value of the home. And the contents coverage is only $100,000. Say this here, that's only if the content coverage was purchased. It is not automatic contents coverage. So if you have flood insurance, and this is something that naively we didn't know, we thought flood insurance was the same as homeowners insurance. We thought flood insurance paid for us someplace to stay. It, you know, rebuilt our house, kind of like if a fire had burned our house to the ground, they would have rebuilt it to the same or better than it was before. That is not how flood insurance works at all. If you have a complete and total loss and you do qualify for the full $250,000, FEMA mails that check directly to the mortgage company. If there is money left over and you have satisfied the balance on your loan, the mortgage company will, a few weeks later, send the difference to you. If that $250,000 does not cover the balance of your loan, you are still liable for that balance. Any questions on the mortgage side of it when it comes to flood insurance?
Julie, can you give us those amounts again?
$250,000 for the structure, and then $100,000 on the contents. The contents. Go ahead,
Julie. If I can jump in, I believe back whenever I was selling the flood policies, there may be a higher amount. Several years ago, that was all that was available, but on the higher end homes, it is, I believe, and whether that was renewed or not last go around in legislation, I did not follow it, but I believe there's a 500 and a 250 that's also available.
The 500 for businesses, to my understanding, and I pulled their most recent guidelines.
Okay, so you're more.
But I could be wrong. But I could be wrong. But their most recent guidelines were from 2012. The 500 it goes towards businesses. It is available. 500 for structure and 500,000 for contents for a small business.
Okay, and that may be my confusion. It's been a few years since I've looked.
Yeah,
they refer to the insurance agent.
And so then on the contents, that check is actually directly to you as an individual. But like I said, the one that is to cover the structure, that goes to the mortgage company first. In our situation, we were not dealing with a disaster the size of this. So our whole process took about 5 weeks, which we were told was lightning speed. It can take months. We also called the the mortgage company to beg for a reprieve of payment, since obviously we had no house to live in. And they told us no, that if we didn't make our payments, they would bring additional fines and penalties to us. And, you know, I'm hoping they have a little bit more grace with Harvey. But again, please make sure your clients, you know, not that they have the money to do that, but please make sure that they check with their mortgage company, because there may not be a lot of grace in the situation. And we do not want in addition to everything else that they're going through, for them to add penalties on top of it. Any other questions on that before we go to the next one? Okay, so I am on the next slide with home and structural damage with no flood insurance. Please file with FEMA ASAP. I heard this latest stat I heard this morning was there are 400,000 homes just in Houston alone that have been affected. And so far 195,000 FEMA claims have been related to Harvey. Just because you have flood insurance does also make a FEMA claim. But part of the FEMA claim is that you are also going to be asked to fill out loan information for the Small Business Administration. That is just basically kind of how this works, right? I mean, obviously at this point in time, there is no way of knowing how much money is going to actually be available. But when you take it and divide it by the 195,000, probably times 2.3, because you can assume that it's not every person in the house, it's one household. So that's 195,000 households that have filed. There is no way of knowing how much money is going to go around. So typically what happens is the Small Business Administration steps in and offers loans. So again, like I said, don't be surprised when they ask you to start filling out loan documents, or ask your clients to start filling out loan documents. That's not what you're applying for, but they're going to ask you to do that as part of the process. And when you fill out your small business loans, they will tell you that the Small Business Administration will extend up to $200,000 to you to repair your home, and up to $40,000 to replace your personal items or contents. That being said, if you end up getting a SBA or applying for an SBA loan, you have to have adequate credit scores, and you also have to have the ability to repay the loan once you get it. So if you can't show that you have the ability to pay the $200,000, then obviously they're not going to extend the $200,000 to you. Understand at this time is that grant money is possible, but there is no information right now in terms of if that's going to be available, at what amounts that's going to be available. So please understand that all this information I'm giving you it's kind of a very rugged outline, and that it is fluid, because new orders are being signed all the time, and new money is being released all the time. Any questions on that part before I go forward?
Karen Young asked, what kind of interest rates typically are there on these types of loans?
So I've actually included a chart further down in the resources, but I believe the homes at this point in time were like 1.45%. So they're pretty good. I know at our time when we applied for them, they were somewhere in the neighborhood of 5%. They were about 1.5% to 2% at that time above the actual going rate, and right now they're actually below the going rate. So I was very impressed to see the actual interest rate that's being offered at this time.
And Heather asked, who decides if the home is a total loss or a partial damage claim?
That is going to be whomever is looking at the house, whether it is your private flood insurance or your NFIP flood insurance, or if that's a FEMA adjuster. So basically they're going to look at it, and if the total amount to repair your home is more than $250,000, then declare it a total loss. What we're going to have to be dealing with in this situation is most of these homes, and again, you can only listen to what the news says, right? And you can look at the amount of water, but they're talking now, it could be October before some of these areas are dried out. And so in that situation, instead of it just being the first 1 or 2 feet of sheetrock that you're going to have to tear out, you're going to have to gut the entire home, because all of that moisture is going to wick up into the back of the sheetrock. And I can tell you, we already have black mold starting to grow. It only takes about 2 days after it stops raining for that to start colonizing, and especially with the heat the way it is. And so when you have, well, any type of mold, but black mold especially, everything has to be torn out and taken down to the studs. So, and because most of your electrical on your first level, let's just say you had even 1 or 2 feet of water in the house, you're talking about all your flooring, your cabinets, which when you tear out your cabinets, obviously you have to lose your countertops, your, all of the whole 9 yards. So if we're talking 3 or 4 feet of water in that house, for even more than a day or two, you're probably looking at getting really close to that maximum claim, unless the house is just very, very small.
We may have just lost our screen.
So while they're working on the screen, let's pause here for a second and talk about some of these things in terms of how is this going to affect our business, right? There will likely be areas where they do not allow building to occur because the federal government honestly can't take another hit like this was, right? So we're going to have, but in the meantime, we're going to have displaced individuals. Where are they going to go? Are they going to stay in that area? Are they going to go to another state? What are they going to do? And then how are we going to house them in the meantime? I would strongly suggest to you guys, as well as, doing your re-inspections and things like that, I fully expect us to see a lot of investors coming in here. Please be careful when you're working with these investors, and because I have seen it happen personally here in our area when we had flooding. These houses would sit, they were never remediated for their water damage. An investor would just come in and slap some new paint on and some new veneers on the cabinets and try to turn around and sell that house, which is an absolute death trap because of the amount of mold and the amount of biomaterial that is trapped behind these walls. I can't stress enough either to you, once it starts drying out and you go out to try to look at either your house or properties you have under contract, wear protective material. I still to this day, 7 years later, have a skin condition they haven't been able to identify because of moving items after the flood. Every now and then it flares up and my skin blisters and I have a rash all over, and they've never been able to identify it, but we know that it was tied back to going through items that had been flood damaged, because around here you have not only human waste, you have animal waste, you have all kinds of bacteria, you've got tetanus in that water, anything and everything. So if you are not up to date on your immunizations, if you have any other underlying health issues, I would strongly suggest you wear at minimum a respirator and you're clothed from head to toe, gloves, no exposed skin, and even that is not a guarantee. So please, please, please be careful. I can't stress that enough when you're out going through these situations. The more you can advise your clients to take pictures of their damage. Again, I know in our case, we even lost our cell phones, and then we got new phones, and they were getting blown up so much from trying to do all of our work on our cell phone and everybody calling, we blew those up. So if you have a camera or you have an extra phone, anything that can help them take pictures and document their damage, the more pictures you have, the easier it is to build your case. We actually had a friend who was an insurance agent that had just gotten her license, and the first thing she did was show up at our house and just started taking pictures of everything. And I'm just kind of standing there looking in a circle, right? Because I was like, I didn't think to take pictures. I was trying to throw things away, and they even wanted pictures of anything completely and totally damaged that we threw away. So the more pictures you can take, the better it is. And there's even a link on the FEMA site to actually upload your pictures as well.
Okay, I have it. Where's American information?
So we do have our screen. Is that what you said?
Yes, and I'm on the slide FEMA Harvey rumor. I think that's where you may be at.
Let's go back one to, if we can, to, how do I file with FEMA? If you do not have, your clients do not have flood insurance, obviously, then you're going to need to file with FEMA. So there's links here. There's one to file through disasterassistance.gov and FEMA.gov. They both go to the same place. Just pick a place and make your claim. The FEMA proof of loss, what I've included here is a document that shows what you're going to need for your proof of loss. And then I've also attached like a spreadsheet here as well, but it goes through and it's pretty good about telling you exactly what they want to see on your proof of loss. And then on the next slide under SBA disaster loan assistance, this is going to explain to you the different declarations that have been made. So there was one that was made, I think it was on the 25th, and then they've added 3 amendments to that since, expanding out the counties that have actually been added to this, because it also picks up some that are in Louisiana. So if you have any question as to whether or not you're in that disaster area, which I don't think people do, but if you do, this one is clear with where that what's covered in those areas there. And then the FEMA Harvey rumor information. This one's a super fantastic site in terms of when disasters strike, people just somehow they create. There's a rumor floating around about whether or not FEMA is hiring, and FEMA is actually hiring. And so I've listed a link at the end of the slide on FEMA jobs, because you may have a client that is single, that lost everything, that can up and move to Louisiana for a few months just to work, right? So there's FEMA jobs that are out there. So that is true. That is not a rumor. The rumor about the flood insurance deadline of September 1, that is absolutely false. You do not have to make your claims by September 1. We also have some additional information on that. So FEMA wanted to make sure that they put that rumor to rest. There's a rumor going around about flood insurance robocalls, where insurance companies are selling flood insurance policy. You've got to buy this policy within so many days, and they want your billing information. That is absolutely not true. FEMA would obviously never do that. So hang up the phone. Please do not give them any of your personal information. If that happens to you, you're asked to call the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance policy, directly and let them know that you received one of those calls. Another rumor that's floating around about Harvey is that undocumented immigrants can't go to a shelter because they're going to be reported to ICE or Customs. That's not true. They are not checking immigration status or anything. Now, if someone happens to get caught looting, or if somebody commits a crime, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be removed from the shelter, you're going to be picked up off the street, and you're going to go to jail, and they'll deal with you at that point in time. But they are not checking document status at all at the shelters. I think I heard this morning we were up to 37,000 people in our shelters. And so again, if you've got 400,000 houses underwater, all the rest of these people are somewhere else. So we know they're going to need assistance here in the future. Inspections and contractor repairs. There's a rumor going around that FEMA charges for damage inspections and contractor repairs. That is absolutely false. If somebody contacts you or comes onto your property telling you that, tell them to please leave your property, and then call and report them as well. We do have people that are going around impersonating the Homeland Security. But real Homeland Security people wear badges. They're labeled as special agent. You can also ask to see their credentials, their badge number, and you can ask for their ERO officer. Feel free to call that in. But again, only a few days into this, and we already have so much junk, I guess, that we don't need going on the back end. The Harvey claim misinformation. This is one that was Oh, sorry, hold on. Apologize, that one's on there twice. Sorry about that. That one's on there twice. Then the next slide is on the AR clarification about the homeowners law. Again, that's really good for us to understand. There was a lot of confusion about the September 1 deadline, and that is really affecting or relates more to people that had hail claims and the claims process that you have to go through to sue an insurance company. But that is not playing a role at this time in anything to do with Harvey. So again, I just want to make sure that you guys had these resource lists. The next slide is a FEMA evacuee hotel list. You can pull this up and it works for any state. So once FEMA starts giving out, whether it's hotel vouchers, this is a list of any hotel throughout the United States that accepts those vouchers, and those vouchers actually pay for the room and the room taxes. They don't pay obviously for food or anything like that. But the nice thing about this list is it also tells you whether or not you can bring your pets to this location. So we may have people that obviously need to go somewhere temporarily until they can go in and start cleaning up their home or rebuilding their home. And so this is a good list as a resource as well. The last slide, I have quite a few resources for you. The FNIP summary of coverage, that is for people who are in a known 100-year floodplain, right, that have flood insurance coverage. This is a really good rule of thumb to look at and to understand when you are dealing with properties that are in the floodplain. It again talks to you about the level of coverage. So if I have somebody that wants to buy a $750,000 house that's smack dab in the middle of the floodplain, I can't tell them what to do, but I can advise them that, look, if your house is a total loss and your loan is, let's say, $550,000, you're still going to be on the hook for $200,000 of that. So that's a good resource for you guys if you've never had any experience with flood insurance before. I'm not sure whether or not you guys know this, but FEMA has obviously clearly delineated floodplains, but they do come in and modify those floodplains every 8 years or sooner if they feel that there is a need to do that. So I know on the wake of this was, a once in a lifetime disaster, probably a million-year flood. I think I've heard the term fly around, but I would not be surprised as a result of this if they did not modify those FEMA floodplains sooner rather than waiting till whatever their 8-year timestamp is. So again, that means that homes that are currently not in the floodplain could become in the floodplain. So that's information to want to be aware of as well. Does everybody know how to use the FEMA maps to determine whether or not a property is actually in a floodplain?
No.
Okay. So if you Google like FEMA flood map, it will take you to there's two different versions of a map, but basically you can put an address in and it will actually bring up the FEMA map. Now, it's not so sophisticated like Google Maps or Google Earth, but if you know where the property is, then you're going to zoom in on that FEMA flood map and you will be able to tell if the property is in zone X, which is not in the 100-year floodplain, zone AE, which is in what we call the 500-year floodplain, and then zone A, which is in the 100-year floodplain. And basically what that means is once every 100 years, right, the property is going to flood. If a property is in the 100-year floodplain and there is a mortgage on that property, the mortgage flood insurance be carried. You either go get it on your own or they force it on you. When they force it on you, their rates are pretty ridiculous. Just personal example, our property, when we bought it back in the early 2000s, it was not in the floodplain. Then when they updated the FEMA map in 2008, a corner portion of our pasture was in the floodplain, but because we own contiguous acreage, that meant that we needed flood insurance. So the quote that we had from our insurance company was $6,000, which was pretty steep. So we paid to have what's called a flood elevation certificate, and that is where they actually shoot the base elevation of your home, which is the first level of your finished floor. So right above the foundation or the slab, right where the brick or the siding or whatever starts on your house, that's considered the first floor finished elevation. They will shoot that off of the satellites, and if that is above the actual floodplain, you get a massive reduction in your policy. So we proved that the lowest corner of our house was only 1/4 of an inch above the floodplain, and that changed our policy from $6,000 to $600. So it makes a big difference, because what they use right now for flood maps are, they basically have 1950s topographical maps, and they count contour lines, and that's how they determine that your property is in a floodplain. Well, we all know with the invention of GPS and satellites that that's far more effective than actually counting contour lines. So
and Julie, if I can just toss in there that instead of advising and doing this for your clients, when you're talking to them, encourage them to reach out to their insurance agent. Insurance agents can pull those elevation certificates. As realtors, we don't want to be doing that for them, because we don't want that liability back on us. We want to remember to be a source, not the resource. So send them over, or vice versa, I think, but send them over to their insurance agent to get those elevation certificates.
Yeah, and most properties don't have elevation certificates. So if you're going to want to buy a property that is essentially in the floodplain, then one is going to need to be paid for in addition to a survey, and they are not cheap. They're about $1,500 to $1,800. But again, I'm stating this information not so much that you do it for your clients, but that you have the knowledge of it. Because again, I never like to have my clients' money at risk. So you don't want to get too far down the road and realize, oh, wow, this is in a floodplain. And okay, well, obviously I'm not going to buy in a floodplain. So again, this is just information for you. And I want you to know where to go get it and how to pull it and what it means to you.
Then the only additional thing I would add in there is, if you're in a 100-year floodplain and you flood this year, it doesn't mean that you're safe for 99 more years. I think logically we all know that, but it just means if you're in a 100-year floodplain, the odds of you flooding are much higher than if you're in, I saw one certificate that showed an 800-year floodplain. And they flooded in Houston in an 800-year floodplain. So it's, the likelihood of you flooding, the lower your number of years in a floodplain, the more likely you are to flood, and the higher the risk. The higher the number of years, the less likely you are to flood. Doesn't mean it will never happen. Just means it's less likely.
And I did read an article from the Nfip that if you are in a 100-year floodplain and you've had more than 4 claims, I think it was in a 20-year period, that they are trying to make some regulations going forward that property not be able to be rebuilt on, because obviously it happened, like Sheila said, more than once in 100 years. But that's kind of how they don't have one that's more frequent than 100 years. It's just 100-year or 500-year or outside the 100-year floodplain. But again, with the levee systems and things like that, I think that's going to get looked at a lot more closely, especially in the Houston area. In the coastal area, then you have additional policies that you typically get for your wind and hail, for your hurricanes, things like that. And one of the other things that I mentioned is, if it is a second home and you did not have flood insurance on that home, FEMA will not pay anything on a second home. Now, whether or not that will change, and they'll offer grant money, but they consider that an investment property, and it is not your primary residence. That is the most current information that I have on that. Sheila, with your insurance background, do you have anything different?
No, that sounds accurate.
Okay. So, obviously that affects a lot of our people down on the coastal areas with the beach houses and things like that. But as of right now, it's reserved strictly for residential use. There is a great article that I've included in here on the hurdles of FEMA, because it's not a perfect system. You have lost everything that you have. You may not even have a vehicle to get to the bank and access money, even if you have a savings account. They make you go through the whole SBA, the small business loan situation, and then and you're still sitting there. And then what may be allotted to you in this situation and or your clients may not be enough to make a dent. So I will tell you, this is where people like you guys helping other people really comes in handy. The American Red Cross, if I remember correctly, gave us, I think it was $150 per person in our household, and we had 6 people in our household. So our check from Red Cross was a total of $750. That didn't make it very far. That didn't even buy that bought a set of clothes and I think underwear and socks and shoes and toothbrushes and hairbrushes, and that's about it. The best way I can tell you to help your fellow agents and your clients and just the community in general is putting money directly in their hands, or finding a nonprofit where you know that 100% of what you're giving is going to go directly into their hands. Because I can tell you the larger companies, they move really slow, and then they have a lot of overhead. So, in some situations, it might only be 60 cents of every dollar that's given that actually reaches individuals. So I know we have a GoFundMe set up through EXP, and I can assure you that that money is going directly into our agents' hands that need it. And, gift cards, $20 cash, anything like that is such a huge benefit to them. Taking them a ton of clothes or a ton of furniture, that doesn't really help. I think Sheila's already addressed that before, because there's no place to put it. There's no way to sort through it. The best thing is just, coming alongside anyone that that's been affected by this, and just asking them, hey, have you filed your claim? Can I help you write down your proof of loss information? Because their heads are spinning. They cannot process. Their feelings are numb. They don't even know what day it is. They will have memory loss and memory lapses, because you start to define, it's almost like the biblical flood, right? Before the flood, before Noah and after Noah. That's kind of how things are in this situation. It's before the event and after the event, and time kind of loses itself there for a little bit. So like I said, the biggest help you can be is just to be there for them, walk alongside them, help them in any way that you can, and just be there as somebody that's kind of prompting them to make sure that they go the distance and get their claims filed, whether it's with their own flood insurance or whether it's with FEMA. Go through the hassle of the paperwork, because the more that they do, then the more likely they're going to get assistance. But it is a very, very daunting process, and takes hours and hours to sit down and do, especially when you may not have a computer anymore, or you may not have a printer or anything like that. So any questions or any ideas about how we can help our fellow agents and fellow Texans?
Julie, I would caution everybody to give the people in Houston a little break on, phone calls or texts, or it's one thing for a couple people to be checking in on them, but when you have 40 to 50 people trying to check in on each one of those people, it really just becomes an overload. So let the people that are assisting these agents do it. And just, if you have something if you know that person, fine, check in on them. But if you're just trying to do it out of the goodness of your heart, I understand that, but just give them a little space, let them get on their feet, and then check in on them.
And we do have the buddy program. So if you're wanting to participate on that, then send an email, and I'll put it in the text chat, to harveydisaster@exprealty.com. Erin Noble is heading that up. I'm co-chairing it with her. It may be the future of what our nonprofit looks like. We don't know. But we are creating a system, so it's somebody to kind of walk this with you for the long term. As most of you have probably seen also on Facebook, there's a reverse referral program that's kind of been a round effort. It's pretty cool to see. There are agents all over the country that are reaching out to us. We will attempt to get that organized, but if you know people, and I think all of us know people in other parts of the country, I'll use Treva as an example. She's an amazing agent over in Houston. She may know people in California, Colorado, Florida, New York, Connecticut. If EXP is in that area, if we're in that MLS and we have agents there, then there are several agents that are saying, hey, if Treva wants to make some phone calls to her family and friends, say, if you want to know how to help me, tell me about anybody looking to buy or sell in that area. Ask them if they will go through me as a referral, and I will refer them to an all-star EXP agent. In doing that, that all-star EXP agent in Connecticut, say, has agreed, and you do the referral agreement as you normally would, but instead of just paying Treva 25% or 20%, there's an amazing group of agents that have decided to flip that number. And so now that all-star agent in Connecticut will go out and show the property, procure the contract, see them through to closing. And when it closes, they're going to take a 20% referral fee for themselves, and they will send 80% of that money to Treva. It is a fantastic opportunity to help offset some of the pain points for our agents in Houston and help them have an income coming in and diversify and build long-term relationships with referral agents around the country.
Absolutely agree, and completely back up what Sheila is saying as well, in terms of if it's not somebody that you have a very close personal relationship with, reaching out to them right now is, the call's probably going to go unanswered because their phones are blowing up. But if you've got directly a family member and or a client that needs assistance, then hopefully this information will help you a little bit more. Any questions on anything that we've talked about today, or anything maybe that I haven't covered that perhaps one of us in the room has knowledge for everybody else?
A question popped up. Teresa Gordon, can renters file for FEMA assistance? And I believe there was a slide referencing that as well.
Yes, they can. And again, in a situation like that, that's where, because they cannot obviously rebuild something they don't own. That's where I think some of that grant money is going to come into play. There just has not been, since they are still at this moment, it's still in recovery and rescue mode. They have not gotten that far, let's just say. Right now, like I said, they're still in recovery and rescue. And then when we start to get into the cleanup mode, I think that's when that information will start coming down from Washington.
Lori Chrissy, will there be links to all these slides? Yes, we will send these out statewide if that's okay with Julie. She took the time to create them.
Yes, absolutely. I saw one boo-boo, so I'll go back and correct the boo-boo before we send it out.
So yeah, it'll be later this afternoon. I'll send them out to everybody around the state, so that way you have them for future reference. And again, Julie's gone into a lot of detail to help educate all of us at a deeper level. It's great to send the links to your clients and stuff, send them the links for these things. Just make sure that you're not advising them on how to fill out their paperwork or how to file their claim. Just share these links with them. That's great, but just be careful that you don't, in the exuberance of being helpful, that you don't overextend.
Yeah, this is one of those things, and I will tell you, I mean, like, had flood insurance and truly had no idea what it covered and what it didn't cover until it happened to me. And so having this information, obviously we don't influence our clients or make decisions for our clients, but just having this knowledge is going to help everybody, so that you have a little bit better idea if you ever encounter this again, right? Or if you're out there selling properties, you're going to be more diligent and looking and making sure that when you see a seller's disclosure and darn good and well that area flooded, that it's marked on the seller's disclosure, or you're going to point that back out to the listing agent, say, I think we might need to fix this. So that, everybody's sometimes, unfortunately, looking out for themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't start seeing some things like that pop up. So again, just having this information, knowing where your flood areas are, knowing what is, currently flooded. And then that way, when you're out there doing your job, you're just kind of double checking things and your second set of eyes on it.
And this was, I was able to record this, so the audio may be a little low. I apologize for that, but it is recorded.
And Joyce, this as well for the Google Docs. We'll send that out.
Any other questions for me, guys, before I turn it back over to Ron and Sheila?
And John, we'll send out that recording. We're learning on our YouTube channel as well. Again, proof that anybody over 50 that joins this company really can succeed. But it'll be on the YouTube channel. We're still learning. Apparently how I set that up wasn't exactly right. So Ron or Logan or one of them will help us, and we'll get that out to everybody as well. And I will say, Linda Spence is the compliance officer or the supervisor assistant broker over in the coastal area. I've jumped in quite a bit on this, having gone through, Ron and I went through numerous hurricanes in our married life. But Linda is a tremendous resource as well for agents to reach out to. Just while we've been in the class, we've had our first call of a broker on the other side looking to hike up the prices on the lease property. We're going to have some situations come up. We expect that. We want to hear you. Don't feel like you're bothering us. Please don't feel like we're too busy for it. Kathy, Gordon, Linda, myself, Ron, there's a whole team of folks ready to support you all. We'll get through it and we'll be stronger for it. In researching how people have rebuilt their business after unexpected disasters and causes strike, you tend to come back with a stronger business. So it's just getting through it between now and until we get to the all better point. I love Tracy Lewis's point. Our brokerage was not lost in the flood. We have no employees displaced because of the flood. We don't have any wet paperwork because of the flood. Our employees are up and fully working. I think Marty was in here earlier. She probably had to jump out. She oversees the transactions. She's a Texas girl. Connie oversees the transactions for Coastal. Connie may still be in here.
I'm here.
Okay, so Connie is awesome and amazing and ready to help in any way possible. As much as we tell the rest of the state, we don't upload docs for you. Obviously, if you're in the coastal area and you're struggling and you need to get paid on a transaction, we're happy to help facilitate that in any way we possibly can. And again, for those that need help, please send in a request to harveydisaster@exprealty.com and we will get help and funds over to you. We understand that there's closings. I had a call from an agent that had 18 closings set up in the next 2 weeks, and every one of them's on hold until those properties are re-inspected. So we get that everybody works on commission basis, and there may need to be some help in the interim. You did not cause this. This is not your fault. This is not poor planning on your part. It's just what happened. So for those of us that are not affected, please share the link to the GoFundMe account. That's not just for EXP agents to donate to. It is directly benefiting EXP agents. And once they're all taken care of, then it'll still benefit hurricane victims through this, or flood victims. So please let us know how we can help. If we're dropping the ball in an area, we want to know. We just want to best facilitate. Any other questions on any other contract issues or hurricane issues or water issues or anything else while you have our attention?
Sheila, I think Becky put one in the text chat. What would your advice be when dealing with a client who would like to continue with a contract when the property is flooded?
Perfect. Awesome. I sent out an email earlier, Becky, and it had Kathy Gordon's blessing on it that we don't want them to sign a notice. I mean, one, that buyer walkthrough is critical. Have them sign that buyer walkthrough form that TAR provides. Also, two, that email that went out earlier today, send that on to them. just saying, as you know, we've experienced quite a bit of flooding. It's my understanding you want to move forward. I'm here to help facilitate that. Look at that verbiage that went out. Kathy blessed that, and let's use close to that exact verbiage as possible. But
And
definitely use those buyer walkthrough forms that TAR provides.
And one thing I would add, obviously we can't tell our client what to do, what not to do, but mold remediation is critical. If a property doesn't have a mold remediation certificate, if it were me personally, I would run, not walk, because the only way that you can prove that they correctly dried out that home, they removed the affected sheetrock, they treated the studs, all of that is through a mold remediation certificate. It's and that mold remediation certificate would protect you or your buyers in the future if that mold grew back, because they are putting their license on that. So just going in and tearing out wet sheetrock and putting up new sheetrock is not mold remediation. And that does not mean that there are not dry spores in the wall that once they get wet will not start growing. And again, you know, if you listen to the news, they're talking about the stacky mold, the black mold, the most dangerous mold. Now that waters are receding and things are drying out, it typically starts to grow within, you know, 1 or 2 days at the temperatures that we're at right now. So again, that's just my little piece of information for you. Mold remediation companies. I had to learn quite a lot about that when I had a client who, it was a new build, and there was a piece of flashing that they missed on the roof, and about 3 weeks before closing, we found this situation going. So there's a lot of good information available to you through the state of Texas, so that if you want to learn information about it, it's out there for you. Check the credentials of the mold remediation company. Again, this is for you personally, right? You can't tell your clients what to do. You can't give legal advice to your clients, but just knowledge for you. So that you understand there are still dangers out there when they're buying a home that's flooded, and proper precautions or procedures have not been followed to ensure that that home is actually habitable, and the air quality and the quality of life in that home will be protected.
Right, exactly. And 2 things, Becky, as far as the client wants to move forward, so send them that email. And then you make sure you do the walkthrough. Somewhere along there, you may have a conversation of, okay, Ms. Buyer, you feel great about moving forward with that. Awesome. I'm here to help facilitate that. Have you thought about maybe having air quality tests done? Do y'all have any allergies? Would you like to move forward with that? Here's a list of 3 or 4 companies that I've heard. I don't really know myself, but here's some companies that I've heard that do that. Want to maybe check for any kind of fungus or bacterial growth that may have been occurring on the property that we can't see. And if the buyer says, I'm good, I'm ready, let's move forward with it. Okay, awesome. That buyer walkthrough that I referenced on the TAR form, you may just add a line in there. Also advised buyer of any of the use or availability of remediation company, buyer declined. So, you may just do something simple like that. Just document. Crosley had as far as what would you recommend for a new agent with no clients. My best advice to folks is conversion, especially if you're in the Houston area. I would work conversion. You might focus on leases. That's going to be a hot topic. That's going to be people that were thinking about buying. Now they've been displaced, so they're going to lease, and then 3 or 6 months, then maybe reevaluate about buying. But right now they're just on overload on decisions. Leases will help hold you over until you can get stabilized back in the selling market again. Conversion is tremendous as far as just go in there. We've had agents that just blindly followed the scripts, and they said it's amazing how well it works. You have to work it. If you saw Jeff Whitespear's post earlier today on eXp Realty, he does conversion, he does sync, he does open houses, he calls his sphere every day, he does networking events, he works off referrals. They're the number 9 company in Houston. He hasn't slowed down. He's running hard right now, trying to keep deals together and get new deals under place. So, act like a top producer and just go out there and try and think, if you're going to volunteer at shelters, I wouldn't get in people's faces about it, but I think I would throw on a bunch of old t-shirts that every one of them has realtor on it, or, just wear an unassuming name badge that has your name on it, just something to where it's just a gentle way, not in your face. So, and then Becky, yes, be careful saying the word mold. If you notice inspectors and stuff won't say the word mold, they just call it a fungus. I would not walk into a home, and even if it's black all the way down the wall, and go, oh my gosh, you have black mold. And it's hard for me not to do that. I would look at it and go, wow, I wonder what that is. We might get somebody in here to kind of look at that. You might, would you like to get that evaluated? And you may know in your mind what it is, but let somebody else be the expert. Let somebody else tell them what it is.
If I could just jump in there and expand on, this is Linda, by the way, expand on what Julie was saying earlier about the investors. Everything that I'm reading is that the investors are going to be in Houston like crazy. But I just wanted y'all to know about a situation that I just had prior to this, where a house was under contract in the Woodlands, and they had a pretty torrential rain there, and before all this happened, of course. And the buyer wanted to go through with it, but she was very allergic to mold. So they did, she just happened to go by and check. This house was a flip, investor flip, and it was all, ready to close. But she went by after the rain and saw that that there had been rain damage. And so then when she went back, she told them she wanted to reinspect. When she went back, like 4 or 5 days later, all the new sheetrock was up and everything was back to normal. So the inspector put his water test or moisture tester against the wall. Pardon me, and it registered 99%. So all the contractor had done on the investor's advice, I guess, is just close it up rather than dry it out, waiting for it to dry out, etc. So there was a big problem, and the house, of course, didn't close. But when they addressed it with the contractor said, "Oh yeah, we always do that. That's not an issue at all." Well, it was a very big issue, and the inspector told her that it would have just been, solid mold behind those walls without it drying out. So be very aware of that, and check and recheck if your buyers do buy a house that's been flipped or redone after any kind of rain or moisture where there was water in the house.
I just put information in the text chat box. Who is the individual that I had to speak with when we had a property that clearly had, we could say mold because we had it identified, clearly had a mold issue. But he is with the Quality and Standards Environmental Committee with the state of Texas, and he's a great resource. So even if you want to reach out and ask him for any brochures or any training information or anything like that you could pass along, or any client resources, right? Any general public information, he'll be able to send that information to you. He was an invaluable resource to us. So again, I put his information in the text chat. Oh yes, I will add that to the slide deck.
Julie,
Guys?
thank you so much for putting this all together, and I know it's been helpful to a lot of people.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. I feel way better educated. Any other questions before we dismiss and head out of here and get back to what we all do?